Now let's get into the next topic, which is before we close, and this is more on Mike. So I'm just going to let Mike here. I'm actually going to give you center stage here. I don't have, since Heroscapers.com is kind of on the fritz and I didn't have time to screenshot it, we don't have any visual. But Mike, go ahead and explain what this topic is all about. There is a link in the description below, though, for anybody who is who's interested in taking a look. And I think this helps in the organization and running of tournaments. So Mike, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, so I guess there's going to be two related topics here. One is what you're referencing. Another is sort of, it's definitely related, and some of what I'm going to be releasing regarding that is going to be added to the first part. So let's start with the first part. The first part is a comprehensive rules treatise. And what this is a book. It's really a document. It's a Google Doc, so I can progressively update it as necessary. That encompasses every ruling in the FAQ and every ruling in the books. At least every worthwhile one. There were just a couple that were nonsense. You know, there was one question that was, wait, really? And then the answer was yes, really, regarding a previous question, right? So stuff like that, you know, we're taken out. Before tournament directors and players especially, you know, let's say you're playing a game and you have a question as to how this works, right? You know, what actually happens here? You know, how does some power interact with another, or just how does a power work, right? How does Glacier Traverse work on the Zootet, right? It's not worded completely clearly. How does grenades work?
Grenades? Yay! I can use my grenades now.
How does stealth leap work? You know, just there's so many powers that, you know, you just can't fit all of the clarifications that you're ever going to need on a single army card. It's just never going to happen. Oftentimes the language is clear if you know what to look for, but that the rule books are kind of famously bad. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of lack of clarity there in the official rule books. And even in Renegades that's going to be coming out, they have their draft up, which it's just the nature of the beast. There's too much. You can't put everything in the rule book. You need FAQs, you need clarifications elsewhere, right? It's just part of the beast of a game like this. So that was really what I was going to do to start, and this started after ScapeCon 1 when I didn't know where to look for something. You know, it's like, okay, I'm checking all these different places and I'm not finding what I need, you know, or not easily finding what I need as a tournament director. And it was like, okay, let me copy and paste every ruling, and I'm just going to compile everything, right? I'm just going to throw everything into one Google Doc. I started doing that. Actually, Dysel started doing that. She just posted, like, I think she copy pasted the entire FAQ and I think like A through D of the books into a single Google Doc. And then we kind of didn't do anything with it for years. That was, again, 2021 ScapeCon 1, and just kind of, it just fell by the wayside. There's so much that goes into ScapeCon. You can only focus on so much a year. That one in particular completely fell by the wayside until more recently, probably 4 months ago or so, 3 or 4 months ago. I don't remember what started it again, but I just was like, you know what? I want to get this done. I want to create this for ScapeCon 4. Also, with more new players coming into the game, more new scenes popping up, I think it's important for the rules, you know, and rulings to be very accessible for players, right? Players should be able to find a ruling on something like how does flying work, how does stealth flying work, and not have to dig through some website that goes down, it seems, every other day now. And you know, why can't we just have a single document that explains this, and then also a document that explains the rationale and the reasoning behind some of these rulings? I'm not like explaining everything, but there's certainly principles that once you understand how a whole group of abilities work, right? Because they all follow the same principles within that. A clear example is with special attacks. You know, I have a section that just begins by explaining, well, here are the basic rules of special attacks. If you understand these, then you move on to the next section, and here are the rules regarding the difference between targeting and affecting a figure and why that matters, and here are the 4 ways it matters. And then there are a bunch of explosion attacks, and guess what? The explosion language on Deathwalker 9000 is like completely different than the explosion language on Jordan. Does that matter, right? Do those powers work the same, or do they not? And it's a mess, So it was a lot of digging through threads and digging through stuff to resolve these issues, and talking to people like Ken and talking to people like Scytale and Doc and Superfrog, is consulting with other people that are knowledgeable, and trying to resolve and find clarity and provide that clarity. And then also, I was just going to copy and paste everything into one big doc, and it kind of hit me that, well, the raw document that I'm starting from, that's just a full copy and paste, is 110 pages long, which is just excessive, right? That's so long. There are also lots of related abilities that work the same or roughly the same. So doesn't it make sense to handle those together? And then it got me thinking, well, why don't I systematically move through from sort of, topic by topic, right? All the movement stuff is together, right? And there's a bunch of sections, there's movement in general, there's movement flying, there are the flying like powers, which are like stealth leap and grapple gun, how does swirling vortex work, right? What about movement, placing versus moving? When is that the same? When is it a little different? Why don't I rewrite? And then frankly, the official rulings, a lot of them, well, some are very, and it was, I don't want to sound too critical, but some of them are very like unprofessional, where like somebody, a response to a stealth leap question is, because he's a crazy leaping monk and he's awesome, like we're talking like stuff like that. It's like, do I really want this in my document? Well, no. And then others have just wrong rationale. There's a ruling regarding explosion attacks that says you target a hex. No, you always target a figure. You're attacking a figure. You're not attacking a hex, which is why when you attack a double space figure, you hit all figures next to that figure. That's common sense. You're shooting Q9. You're not shooting the one hex that his front foot is standing on. But that's the language in the FAQ, because you have to understand that these aren't all written by somebody like, a Craig Van Noss or somebody that's really knowledgeable. Some of these are from just random, employees of Wizards of the Coast at various times. So they're not all using proper Heroscape terminology. So that basically was the impetus for me completely overhauling it, rewriting almost all of it, and reassembling everything into very clear, if you have a question on movement stuff, it's all going to be found in the movement section. You're not going to be searching for this in a huge document. And I also made sure to, make everything super consistent. The language throughout is consistent, right? And the, every ability goes ability name, and then in parentheses, the character or characters that has that. And so I kept that consistent. And so if you search the document, if you have a question on Sir Gilbert, who has Jandar's Dispatch, if you search either Sir Gilbert or Jandar's Dispatch, you're immediately going to come to the ruling you need, right? Which is like, I just asked Ken about this today, because this is another thing I'm doing, is including other stuff that's not in the official FAQ in the books that are true, that are right. So for example, Sir Gilbert using Jandar's Dispatch on a Sentinel of Jandar. Can that Sentinel of Jandar fly during that dispatch move? And the answer is yes, both based on the text of the card and based on an official ruling I found from 2006 in a random post that you would never know exists, But I went digging for that today and I found it because I wanted to be able to footnote that and say that not only am I saying it's true, but I also do have an official source for this. What about Jandar's Dispatch then on Zutet? Well, Zutet, the answer is no, because it's instead of moving normally, and that knight would not be moving normally, right? So, and I'm not going to get into a ton of minutia here with a ton of different stuff, but that's an example of, that's something that can absolutely come up any day, right? Any day somebody can be playing Gilbert with Knights and Sentinels or something, and they might have that question. And before this document, you would check the FAQ and it's not there, and then you would check the book and it's not there. So what's that player left to do, right? So that's my goal as well, is to include more of these rulings and try to put as much, just as much stuff into this one place in an easy, logical, consistent and clear manner, right? And then there's a little more, that I also stepped in and added that's not technically official. For example, I know myself and the OHS guys had created a joint ruling on a couple key things, including grenades, because grenades are a mess. We revised the rules completely because the official, first of all, the FAQ and book rulings were a mess and didn't cover all the situations. And then there was an official ruling a couple years later that was also a mess, led to really bizarre results, was more complicated than it needed to be. So we collaborated for a couple days and figured it out. A more famous example is the ladders, which is a bit of a meme in the community. You have to understand that was in a private chat between me and some OHS guys and a couple other people, and it was thousands and thousands of messages over a week of arguing and debating and reading and researching old threads and trying to figure out how the heck ladders work, because the rules for ladders are awful. The rule book, the Fortress of the Archcarry rulebook has 10 pages devoted to, maybe it's not 10, but it's got a lot of pages devoted with a ton of example pictures, and it is the most unclear, non-coherent set of rules in all of Heroscape. I mean, it is truly terrible.
So, if something's that incoherent, would it be a good thing to bring it to a big event of 78 people, or would it be better to not use ladders? Just asking.
Well, luckily, myself and the OHS guys created nice, comprehensive, easy to understand and apply rules for Scape, that we're using for Scape content. So we did the work for you.
Yeah, because I know we have at least one map that has ladders. I know of at least one.
Take the map with no ladders. I mean, that could have been your other option, but that's all right. That's okay.
For reference, Ken gave me crap for a week, every day, consistently, about including that map in the pool. Yeah, no, ladders are complicated. But anyway, so I included that in the document, and I basically said, look, if you want, and I'll end up just footnoting it, but I'm basically advising TOs, use these rules, right? Technically, maybe overstepping my authority. I mean, it's my document. I can do what I want, of course, but if you don't want to follow the joint OHS and ScapeCon rules to make ladders at least somewhat workable, you don't have to. I'm definitely, and it's clear in there that this is community rules on this, right? That this is technically not official. Technically you have to use the ladder when walking down. It doesn't make any sense that you do. And the FAQ is, in our opinion, just sort of poorly worded. It was more dealing with moving up, that you have to use the ladder, but it technically says, there's technically an FAQ entry that says you must use the ladder. So we decided to ignore that. We just said, no, if you want to skip the ladder, skip the ladder. We're not going to make you walk down the side of the cliff, basically, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I included that stuff. I also included a comprehensive combat chart. It's one of the sections, and I worked on it for a while, probably a week, on just that chart, and it resolves every single ability that comes up in combat. If you have a question of how does Venomous Sting interact with Isamu's Vanish, how does Tandros Creel's Cleave interact with Scurry and Scatter, etc. And a couple of these, and it's footnoted, and I actually put a big commentary section, a couple paragraphs that explains this as well. A couple of these are ScapeCon rulings, right? Because the official rule is really that for some of this stuff is that you have to roll a d20, and every single time it comes up, you have to roll a d20 to see which will resolve first, which it slows down the game, and it means that the players don't know what's going to happen, right? You have no way of knowing which is going to happen first, which to me is also something that should be avoided whenever possible. The official rulings do a really good job of always ignoring and figuring out some way to make it so that it's not a D20 roll. That's just the final tiebreaker, really, and it, in my opinion, should be reserved as such. So, I mean, yeah, that's basically it. I mean, it's a long document. The last thing, and what I was going to say as well, is that I'm going to be adding in some basic, I don't want to say ethical guidelines, but here is what happens in Heroscape tournaments, right? Here's how people act. And this as from one tournament director to another, because this document is definitely for players to search up rulings when they need 100%. it's also for tournament directors. It's supposed to be also guidance. You know, here is coming from somebody that's run tournaments for a long time, that's running EscapeCon that has, 78 people. Here is how you should handle some of these situations, right? Should you allow rule sharking? Should you allow angle shooting? What does that look like? What does that mean for mandatory stuff? Like, do you have to remind your opponent that they get height? And if the answer is yes, it's a mandatory thing. They're not allowed to not roll for height or for Raylan or for jungle. Same with Wanok. All these things are mandatory triggers. You must do them. You must remind your opponent. Same with Plague, same with Searing Intensity. I mean, this is undisputable stuff, but it's just good to have that in clarity. But then there's some more gray areas where it's like, what about, and I had somebody call this on me when I was 15, and I mean, I still won that game, but I had somebody call it on me where I started to move Nirak before I moved the heavies, and then he said, I started to move the heavies before Nirak. I started to move one heavy, and I went, oh, I haven't moved Nirak. And he said, nope, you can't. You started moving your heavy. You can't go back and move. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's how we're playing. That's like not cool at all, but I guess that's how you're going to try to beat a 15-year-old kid. So that's something that to me is unacceptable. Nobody in the community currently does that. I mean, we're talking like early Gen Con. We're talking like 2012, 2013 when that happened to me. Nobody in the community does that anymore. It's sort of self-selected out any of the bad actors just because it's such a small community. Everybody talks, everybody knows each other. I'm going to be posting the EscapeCon regulations, which are going to include, guidance on stuff like this. And I'm going to, to finally tie that back into the original document, I'm going to include that as a section, right? And that's going to be something that every tournament director gets to decide for themselves. But in my opinion, this is based on seeing how people act and play in this community, because it's way better than any other community I've been in. I played in a lot of other, a fair number, I shouldn't say a lot of, but a fair number of other competitive communities. And I could say that stuff like that would 100% be called on you in those other communities, and it would be enforced. The judge, if you called the judge and was like, well, but why does it matter? The judge would be like, no, you started to do that. Or like, let's say you were playing fourth mass and you declared that you were going to attack with this one guy. Technically, that's like initiating the attack. In a lot of other communities and systems, once you declared that, you couldn't change your mind. That you declared your intent to attack with that guy, you must go through with it, right? It's like, it's the stupidest crap, and we don't play like that. We're way more laid back, and it's just unacceptable. That's the bottom line. And some people might think I'm overstepping my bounds with that. Once again, it's my document, and it's my event. If you don't like it, that's too bad, but there's nobody in the community that plays like that. There's nobody that angle shoots that. Just be good to each other. That's the bottom line, is just if you come with a good attitude and you're good to each other, everybody's gonna have a great time. You're gonna have a great time, everyone else will have a great time. That's, Ryan and Jeremy, you've seen it. Nobody's angle shooting at EscapeCon.
Right.
Definitely agree with everything you said there. That was pretty good.
Yeah, and people talk in the chat saying to you, Mike, thank you for creating something, because it sounds like it's going to be a good tool, a good useful tool to use in the future, where you just have everything compiled and very, very useful when you do have like issues or questions, like because I know there's been a time or two in EscapeCon to where I've had a disagreement with my opponent on something about like a rule for a miniature or whatever, or for a squatter here or whatever, and we would have to have someone in charge come and make the decision. And I know one time it was actually against me, like I was wrong in the situation, and I'm like, okay, I can accept that, that's fine, it was something that I just wanted clarifying, and that's fine, as long as we keep that, even if you don't like the decision, as long as you keep that presence of goodwill to the person, and keep an open communication, I think that's a very important thing, and it's good to relay in a tool like this as well. So yeah, really appreciate that, Mike. And I understand that there's probably months and months and months of work that you probably put into that, so yeah, definitely appreciate that.
And one thing I like to tell people too is, like, this is a game for 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what 8+ on the box. Like, just treat it like that. Like, it's, you're not winning any cash prizes. Like, you know, like, just be respectful, man. You know, like don't be a jackwagon. Like that's ultimately like just be cool. We're all cool with each other. You want to be a jackwagon, go do that somewhere else.
Right. I mean, I think I was like 9 or 10 when the game first came out, so that's spot on there.
Yeah, and that's the theory behind why the community is so much better than a lot of these others, is that this was like, even those early Gen Cons and stuff were father sons coming a lot, right? It was a lot of families coming together to play this game. I know when I started playing in 2012, it was my first year and I came with my dad. I know it was Veggie's first year, he came with his dad, and I know it was the Ash's first year, and that was a group of brothers and a cousin coming, it was just like, and we go there and it's like the elders, right? Which is a couple guys, a couple of their friends, and then their dad who would just come and watch and never played, for like 5 or 6 years. He would always come to Gen Con, never played. And then he started playing. And now he's, having a great time. He still comes every year. And now he plays all the time too. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. It's the same, like and a lot of this stuff comes up like once Escape Con, right? Or once a Gen Con, but I'm just trying to get ahead of the issue and trying to make it so that's consistent and have what I want the tournament directors then to say is, look, this is how Mike has set it up. And if you have an issue with it, you can talk to him later, right? Is to shift the blame back to me and I'll take the blame for this. So for example, another thing that comes up like once Escape Con consistently, though, it's like once every year, is somebody round one will have 4 squads of Romans and Marcus, and they'll put all their order markers on Marcus, mistaking the card for the Romans. Happens every year where somebody does something. It's very clear they meant to put all their order markers on the Romans and not Marcus, right? They're not just going to use their bonding hero the whole time. They're going to use the Romans. I've decided to, basically, like, the expectation is that you let your opponent change. When it's clear, when it's not angle shooting, it's not like, oh, I roll for initiative and it was a close point in the game where I had Marcus and one Roman up and I want to then change to, because I want initiative, right? I want to get that extra attack. Like, no, obviously we're not allowing that because that's a strategic decision. But when it's very clear on what your intent is, I mean, that's the expectation. And I have no problem with one of my tournament directors stepping in saying, yeah, they get to change, and then afterwards, that's going to be a conversation too between me and that person saying like, hey, like, we really don't do that here. That's just not what we do.
Sure.
Another example is let's say you attack with somebody and you had height. You roll 2 skulls, they roll 2 shields, right? And then you move on to your next attack on somebody else, completely unrelated, not the same figure, just completely, some other guy. And then you roll that attack, they defend, whatever happens. And you're like, oh, wait, I was supposed to have height over there, Everybody in the community is going to, pretty much everybody in the community, and I'm saying the expectation that should be everyone, is going to say, yeah, go ahead and roll that die to see if that inflicts that wound, right? See if that inflicts a wound to that hero or if they get the kill. Again, it's just like, just be great to each other, right? Just be good to each other, be communicative. A lot of this comes down to clear communication. I always try to say when I'm attacking, like 4v5, or 3v5, or I'm doing, and I'm not asking you to do a ton of work, and I'm not asking, you're not going to catch everything that your opponent is doing. I'm definitely not saying like you should be coaching your opponent like, oh no, don't do that, go do that instead. But it's just like, keep the game moving. I mean, that's the other thing is like if somebody starts moving their knights and they didn't bond yet, and then they catch it, well, yeah, you gotta let them go back and do it. And now we're wasting time for you to rewind the knight move Gilbert, roll a dispatch. It's like, why didn't you just remind them in the first place? Save us the time. We're on a tight schedule. Keep the game moving. Just be good to each other, right? Like, remembering that you bond is not a skill. That's not like what we're trying to measure here, is how well you're able to remember your triggers. And there are certain communities, especially in card games, that are huge on that. Are like, remembering your triggers is a skill. And it's just like, well, isn't the skill supposed to be in how you play the game, not your mental, capacity to remember, which everyone has different, abilities regarding that? Like, that's just not it, It's just not it, man. We're just not about that. Yeah, that was a lot, I know, but
Okay.
That's, it's rulings and it's policy and guidelines and guidance, for which, all of that I think is valuable in some aspect or another. And I guarantee you, anyone that reads the document will learn something. I learned stuff while creating it, and I already knew, a fair bit about the rules, but it was like, oh, we're getting deep into some of this stuff, right? There's a lot of time into it. I definitely recommend, if you have a ruling question, just go there first. It's gonna cover it. That's the bottom line.
Well, thank you, Mike, so much. And again, link in the description below if you're watching this on the podcast, or I'm definitely do a segmented video of this. And yeah, check out link description below to find the link and get that. And definitely, hopefully, it's a good change for not just ScapeCon, and those of you who are going to ScapeCon or considering going to ScapeCon for the future. Definitely check it out, or maybe it's something you want to use for your own tournaments or conventions in the future, because I have a feeling that these might sprout up more. So it's definitely a good tool to have. And I'll finish what Justin says in the chat, and I understand this reference because I just watched that movie a few months ago. Be excellent to each other from Abraham Lincoln. And if you don't understand that pop culture reference, you have a movie to watch. So with that,
one correction to that: be excellent to each other.
Be excellent.
Yo, that needs to be a shirt.
Excellent to each other.
I do like that. I like that.
I would wear that
actually
shirt so much.
Okay.
Hey, Josiah, that game you're talking about, I think, is Dungeon Command.
So, Josiah, you got another shirt to make then. All right, awesome.